So this video is the fifth part of the topic, this keyword, and so far we have covered 4 different parts where we have understood what is default binding, what is your implicit binding, what is your explicit binding, and what is the role of new keyword with respect to this keyword. And in this video we are going to look at arrow functions, and honestly this video is going to be really short. So if I have to sum up this whole video in one statement, then I could simply say that your arrow function does not care about this keyword. In fact, it does not care about super keyword, arguments, and I think there's a bunch of other list of keywords that arrow functions does not care about at all. And if you're thinking like, I'm not able to visualize what that actually means, then you can think about if statement. For example, if you have a function and then you have an if statement within that function, and then within that if statement you write, let's say console.log this. Do you think the if statement impacts this keyword in any sense? No, it does not, right? So same is the case with arrow functions. So they are pretty much synonymous. I mean, you can think of arrow function as an invisible boundary. So whenever your function body is executing one statement after the other, the value for this keyword is not impacted by your arrow function, because your arrow function is more or less like if statement. It does not impact the value of this keyword. What impacts the value of this keyword is basically the environment in which your arrow function is. And if you look at if statement, your if statement is going to be within a function somewhere, right? And this keyword will be resolved by how that function was invoked, and same is the case with your arrow function. Having said that, now let's grab our coffee and get to the console. Okay, let's create a simple object and then let's test out our cases of arrow function. And now what basically we have is a function within the method of this object. And now when I do person.getName, we are going to see that it does not return us anything. And it is for a simple reason that if I show this window object over here, where's my flashlight? Show toolbar, flashlight. Does it work? Yeah. So if you see this, the name property on the window object is an empty string, and that's what basically dev console was giving it to us. Because if I write the same object and instead of doing this .name, and if I invoke this function right here itself, let's say get name, we get window as our response. And that's the reason arrow functions are really useful, because arrow functions do not care about this keyword in it, because this regular function cares about this keyword and it is doing something interesting which we have to be careful about. So how will things change if I use arrow function over here? So let me clear the console and let's take this same body . So this one is pretty much predictable, because if you see here, we use arrow function, but the value of this is something which is equivalent to even not having arrow function over here. And what I mean by that is, let me show you. So let's say if I did not have this, and now if you invoke this, so the value of this keyword without the arrow function is rightly pointing to this object, which is basically our person object. Okay, it should have an arrow. Yes, this. So this points to the person object, and the arrow function basically does not create a new rule, because the definition of arrow function itself for this keyword says that it does not define a local binding for this keyword, super keyword, arguments, and there's list of bunch of other keywords as well. I think the example which I was giving you, that it's equivalent to using if statement. So let me show you what I meant by that then. Although we have used if statement here, it does not matter, because if statement does not define a local binding for this keyword. So same is the case with arrow functions. And arrow functions are really useful when we are using callback functions, and even like the browser APIs like set timeout. So let's say if we had the same object, and instead of using this statement, I write set timeout. Okay, so you will see that even though we used even though we used this browser API or this timer API from browser, which is your set timeout, the value of this keyword was still nicely bound to our object. And that's a really interesting use case, because you don't have to now worry about what the value of this keyword is going to be, because you can just rely on where you are enclosing the usage of such APIs which are invoking the functions for you, because an important aspect for this keyword is how the invocation was done. And now, because of arrow functions, you don't have to worry about that. Okay, so before we end this video, that reminds me that there's this one interesting example which shows up in lot of puzzle related questions in JavaScript, and it's a good edge case to remember. So let me show you that example through. So let's say I use the same example, and now what I do here is instead of using the cool ES6 feature, I'm going to go back to using it the regular way, and I will make the get name itself the arrow function. I'll get rid of this set timeout, I'll get rid of this statement, and now, okay, I want you to take a moment and try to guess what is the value of this keyword in this example is going to be. So at this moment, you should be asking yourself that where is this arrow function within the lexical environment? So you must be tempted to believe that, okay, the lexical environment looks like probably this, because you know it is contained within the person object. But you have to remember that an object does not create a scope in JavaScript. It's only the functions. So this is the arrow function, okay, and this is contained within this object, and what is outside this object would defines the scope, which is your global scope. So in this case, the value of this keyword is not going to be the person object, it's going to be the window object again. And that's one, and this actually is one of an interesting case which shows up in a bunch of places like interviews and stuff like that. So that was it for arrow functions, and if you have any questions or doubt, then you have the comment section, you leave me a feedback and I'll help you out there. And if you would like to read some summary notes of this video, then you can head over to my website called as arrowsailor.com, and that's where you'll find a bunch of other articles and most of the summary notes for the videos I'm creating on YouTube. And lastly, and most importantly, if you really like this video and you want me to cover more such topics in JavaScript, then you can let me know by liking this video and subscribing to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video then.